Welcome to the Monday Monologue. Well, today I'm going to ask the question, why do I DIY? Or why do any of us DIY? And there's probably a variety of reasons. And the first one is the one that I honestly have the least respect for, is folks that are only doing it to try to save money. They're not wanting to be creative. They're not wanting to learn anything. They're just trying to save a buck. And those are the people that I struggle with helping the most, because they ask very simple, basic questions where if they did any research at all, and if they bothered to learn how to read a schematic, they wouldn't be bothering me about which resistor goes where and that kind of thing. And yeah, I handhold people a lot going through some of these mods and stuff. And I know it's like, hey, I bought this amp, I want it to sound better, but I don't want to really learn what I'm doing. I just want to do your mod to it. And so show me exactly how each part goes to each tag strip, and I don't care what it's doing. And I get that there's probably a lot of people that watch my videos and stuff that's all they're interested in. And to me, that is not why I do it. I do it to learn. And I honestly, well, at the time, it's frustrating, like this amp was with its parasitic oscillations that I ran into. At the end of the day, I'm going to learn something from fixing the problem that I ran into. And that's what really drives me to do this, is the joy of learning and figuring out how this stuff works. And yeah, I'm not going to have some of the deep understanding of, I guess I understand the theory, but there's parts of this that I still don't really understand how it works or what it's doing. Maybe some people might say you just know enough to be dangerous, but so far I feel like that I've really figured out some unique things about getting tube amps to work, and how these circuits thrive as far as being enjoyable to listen to. And so that's really why I DIY. Another reason I can see people doing it is you can customize what something's going to look like. You can put it in a wood chassis, or you can put it in a metal one with the tube rings, or you can not use them, or you can paint the transformers orange or blue or whatever you want to do and make it your own. And I think that's really cool to be able to be creative with it. And then the other thing is, once you learn to read the schematic and you really understand what the parts are doing, it makes it much easier to tune it and adjust it to make it sound best with your system, which is your speakers, your source, your room, all of it. And some of them might sound better with a different shade feedback resistor. We've done that with some amplifiers, and people have, hey, a 200K sounds best to me. Oh, somebody else says, I like a 470K, I like a 300K, that sort of thing. And so I think that's helpful, and to be able to kind of understand what your kind of self mods are doing, and you're not just kind of throwing rocks at something, which seen that happen too in the DIY community. Folks that have no idea what they're doing, just, I'm going to put a bigger cap in, or I'm going to, that sort of thing, when they don't understand why an amplifier might have hum in it. And instead of addressing the hum, they try to just shotgun it, or do kind of a patch on it instead of actually fixing the problem. And so on this amp, I found the problem, and it's something I've harped on my personal builds when I show y'all how to build an amp. It turned out to be the parts layout. And I had kind of followed the theme or the kind of layout topology that the original amp had, and on hindsight, it doesn't make any sense. And so we basically reversed the order of the parts on the tag strip, and I'll show you that in a future video. And I appreciate the whole community thing where people were sending me, suggestions about, hey, maybe it's the lack of a grid stopper or a screen stopper, or here's some other things you can do to kind of tamp out these oscillations. But the reason I didn't want to do that is my friend Mark has the Magnavox version of this. We're using a 12AX7 instead of these octal tubes, and his doesn't have any stoppers on anything. And he opened the feedback loop and tested it, and his doesn't oscillate without any of that. So it's like, okay, there's something else going on, and I don't think that trying to, kind of patch this is the right solution. I need to figure out why it's doing this when it shouldn't be. And so, yeah, that turned out great. And I got to do the other channel. I'm going to show y'all how to do that. And, one of the things I struggle with too is it's like, okay, I did a couple of videos showing how to do it, which was wrong, and then said, whoa, it's got problems, and then I'm going to show y'all how to do it right. There's a part of me that thinks, well, should I take those videos down? Because somebody stumbled on those and they were impatient and they just followed that. It would be the wrong way of doing it, and they would be repeating my mistakes. But there's the other side of me that I think I want to show y'all the mistakes and when things are wrong, how I figured out how to make it right and what fixed the problem. And I think that has more value than just showing some kind of dumbed down, here's how you replace these parts to make this amp versus the original one. And I hope that makes sense. I mean, one of the things I've kind of valued on this channel is being honest. Like you can see my workbench is a mess right now. You should see this part up here. You can't see, it's even worse. But hey, this is just how my workspace is. And yeah, once I get this amp cleaned up, we're going to be cleaning the bench off to start on the next project. And I do have a customer's ST70 here that I want to do an upgrade to, and we're going to do a new version of the little headphone adapter box. And the first one we did worked fine, but I think I'm going to build this one with some bigger resistors and some of those flush-mounted banana plugs instead of those kind of chintzy looking little banana jacks that have the what do they call them, the three-way ones, because most people use banana plugs for their speakers, and so I think that makes more sense. So we're going to do an updated one of those, and I think I'm going to go through and show y'all doing the fab work. It's a really good first fabrication project because there's no power cord, there's no square holes, it's all, you don't need chassis punches or anything, it's all just drilling holes. And I can show y'all how I lay out and do all that kind of stuff, and I've learned some tricks since I did the first one, so we're going to be doing a video on that. Plus I want to build one for myself because I've got some good headphones now, and I've never listened to my 300B amp through some headphones, and I'd like to see what that is like. So that's going to be a project here coming up shortly, and then probably going to jump back on that 6C33C and try to figure that out. I feel kind of empowered figuring out this amp, and I know I can figure out that one too and get that project behind us. And yeah, not sure what's next. Maybe a 300B amp, who knows. Just kind of do what I feel like doing. So I do have another minor surgery tomorrow, which I hope is a pretty simple thing. And I've been struggling with this for about a year now. They call it trigger thumb. There's this tendon that goes to my thumb in here that's got like a knot in it, and it keeps irritating the inside of the tendon sheath, and just sometimes it feels fine, and then I'll go through a week or two and it's real stiff and I'll barely move, and it hurts every time I move it. Taking a bunch of Advil, and then it kind of calms down, and then it just comes back. And so they've got a procedure where they come in and they just put a little slit in the sheath right where the knot is so that it doesn't like rub and irritate the inside of the tendon sheath. And done some research, pretty common surgery. They just do it with a local anesthetic, and it doesn't take long to heal, I hope. And so, yeah, hopefully it doesn't put me down again for another few weeks, but I don't know what's going to happen. Going to get that done tomorrow, and so, yeah, that's why I kind of knocked out working on this yesterday. So the other thing I was going to talk about is I went to the Atlanta Audio Club, and I don't know if you guys go to audio clubs or have one nearby. This is actually a fairly large club. There was probably 25 or 30 people there today. And guy did a program about speaker placement in the room, and there was some interesting information about how you would set up like a dedicated listening room. There wasn't as much information about like setting up a non-dedicated room for listening, but being an audiophile space, kind of didn't really, that's probably more what those guys are doing. They probably have a dedicated room in their house for listening, which I don't. But there was still some interesting information. And there was a part, though, about some kind of voodoo audio stuff that I'm not real sure about. And I'm not going to say that the stuff was snake oil that he was talking about, but it was kind of headed in that direction. But anyway, if he enjoys his system and enjoys the hobby, people can spend their money on whatever they want to. It's not my place to tell them what to do. But one of the things that came out of that, and I reflected on my views on speaker cables. And I used to not believe the speaker cables made any difference. It's just a freaking piece of wire. How could that make any difference in the sound? And it just didn't make any sense to me. And honestly, it still doesn't. But being the skeptic that I am, when I tried some different speaker cables, and the more expensive speaker cables actually sounded worse than the zip cord, because I wasn't expecting it to make any change, then when I heard the change, it wasn't confirmation bias or expectation bias. It was an actual change. And it wasn't for the better. And expectation bias would be that the $100 speaker cables are going to sound better than the $10 zip cord. But it didn't. And I think having the attitude that that's not going to make any difference is a good way to go into listening to changes that you make to your system. And like rolling tubes, you should not expect that this tube's going to sound better than that tube because of something you read online, or that you paid more for these tubes, because they may or may not, depending on the circuit, the amplifier, the output transformers, the speakers that are connected to it, can all impact what a tube's going to sound like. And because Johnny Boy over on stereo dot whatever said that these are the best things he's ever heard, doesn't mean they're going to be the best sounding things in your amp. And the same thing with speaker cables. The speaker cables that I didn't like on my amp, in my speakers, might work fantastic on somebody else's. And so I really think you have to go into changes to your system expecting nothing to really get a accurate understanding of like what the change is, because you have to be ready to accept that putting a more expensive part in is going to sound worse. Example of that, the phono stage that I sell. Had a customer that had bought one of them already that has the normal Mundorf aluminum oil caps, which are, I think, about $15 a piece, maybe $20 a piece now. Everything's going up. Anyway, not stupid expensive, but they're not, $1.50 caps either. And I do think from testing that they're worth the $20 a piece because they just sound a lot better. Because I built one of those phono stages with the little cheap caps that they come with, and honestly just wasn't that impressed with the phono stage until I put the Mundorf caps in it and let them burn in for about an hour, and then it really started sounding good. So, the customer said, if that sounded good, I bet it'll sound really good with some of these high-end Jupiter caps. And so he asked me about it, and I was like, I don't know. I tried some of those copper foil MyFlex caps just in one position in the phono stage, and I didn't like the way it sounded. But he was convinced that these Jupiter caps, he says, I put them in speakers and they sound good, so I'm going to drop ship you a set of these Jupiter caps. And I think they were $120 a piece. And built the phono stage with them, and I probably had a preconceived bias that I wasn't going to like them because I tried the MyFlex copper foil cap and just didn't like them in that phono stage. Didn't like the Jupiter caps either. And it sounded so bad to me, I was embarrassed to ship it out. And I burned it in for a week on my system, listening to music, 8 hours a day or so, playing through it, trying to put some time on them, thinking they would break in. And you would think that they're almost 10 times as expensive, they're going to sound at least a little bit better. And they just didn't. And I didn't say anything to the customer. I said, I got your phono stage built, and said, and it sounds okay. Shipped it to him. And about a month later, he emailed me back and said, yeah, that first one you sent me sounds better than this one when I A/B him. And he was disappointed too. But at least he was honest with himself. And a lot of people aren't. They spend money on stuff and they just say, hey, it sounds fantastic because I spent this money. And sometimes it just doesn't. I mean, I bought a Denon, I'll have to go look up the number. I'll put the number up here. Mono cartridge. And people gave this thing, rave reviews saying it's just a really great sounding phono cartridge. And I just don't like it. And it wasn't crazy expensive, but it wasn't cheap. And there I am. Now I've got this phono cartridge that I'm not crazy about. But at least I know now that there's not something out there better that I would like. And obviously there may be another phono cartridge out there that's $5,000 that sounds even better than that AT-OC9 XML that I really like. But at some point you just have to go, you know what? This sounds good. I'm going to listen to it and enjoy it. And that's the other thing is that, some people, I guess, are just never happy with their system and they're just constantly upgrading. And I feel like I finally got mine at a point where I really enjoy it. And I know when I turn it on and listen to it, it's going to sound good. And I hope you all can get your system in that same place that you're happy with. So anyway, I think that's going to wrap up the Monday Monologue. Don't really have a great music selection this week. I will mention that if you're a Who fan, and I may have said this before, but it's worth saying again. If you're a fan of the Who and you like Who's Next, I've been trying a bunch of different pressings. The digital copies don't sound good. Haven't been able to find something that just really sounds like audiophile quality. And I finally just got to the point I thought maybe it's like that Back to Black Amy Winehouse that just, it was recorded bad. And then I found a good one. Moving On Vinyl, which sounds like kind of a bogus company, but their remastering of it sounds fantastic. And so does the pressing. And it's well worth finding a copy of that if you like that album. And that's one of the rock and roll albums from the 70s that I really love. So, or late 60s, wherever that was. Anyway, so that's my music selection for the week. And sorry for you streaming guys, there's just not a good digital copy out there that I found. So, vinyl heads only. So anyway, hope you're enjoying this content. If you are, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters. Thanks to you folks that have joined the little membership thing down here. Get you a little preview of some of my videos. And I'm not gating content, but I do every once in a while toss out a poll or a question or stuff like that to my members. So if you want to be part of my inside community, join the membership. And we will see you next week for the Monday Monologue.